Hey guys, okay, so let's go over a few assignments, one that you had to do last week that I've completed grading on, and then the cert assignment we'll talk briefly about, and then the last really 3 weeks, or 2.5 weeks. So, for starters, question one, part one, that was due Wednesday at 6 p.m., worth 6 points. Basically, the question was, what subgroups or categories are hazards divided into? And then tell me how DHS and FEMA define these, and then look around the internet and tell me what others or how others are classifying those. And I think some of you have taken terrorism courses before, and maybe even my terrorism course, but I know that one thing that I pretty much harp on a lot is the idea that terrorism is defined differently depending on what agency you work on, whether you're in academia or city state government. There are over 100 definitions used for the word terrorism. And I say that right here because the same thing is true when it comes to how hazards are classified / divided into, and that is a big issue. So really, you just went to the FEMA site and looked, and you might not even have been able to find it if you looked into subgroups or categories. There's just many different ways that these are even discussed. So you might have been a bit frustrated. And I'm not going to say that the point of this question was to frustrate you, but was to look to see that there are no clear-cut definitions for many things. So that's the point here. And in my graduate class, we kind of get into this idea further of what this actually means, these definitional dilemmas across the field. So there were, so here the key issue is there's more than a single way to categorize these hazards, and then subhazards and subcategories. Here's just one way. There are 3 different types and then examples of each. So for this one, you essentially had to tell me what FEMA said, tell me what DHS said, and give me some other examples. That is what you need to do for full credit there. So, number 2, what part of the U.S. are these most likely to occur? Now, this is what I was looking for. These like states. You could have even given me localities, but states was probably the best way to go about this. If you just went northwest, southwest, that was not what you needed to do for full credit. So that's number 2. Number 3, and I also would have liked if you would have told me where you got that information from, but I don't specify that until the second part of this assignment, so you weren't docked for that. And then part 3 here was the chart that, hold on, I'm going to pause this. Okay, back. So down here, this is what I was looking for here, giving me some information about what particular hazard they were more susceptible to. And the best way to do this was to go to, yes, I gave you websites right here, but also if you want to know what's going on with Wichita, Kansas, you should probably go to the Wichita, Kansas emergency management site. They should have all of this information, and the hope would be that you would cite where you got this information from, but that didn't happen across the board, and so you weren't docked if not. But that would be the hope, that if you want to know about, like, every locality is covered by some emergency management agency, be it the state agency or locality agency, the county agency. And worst comes to worst, there's always the federal layer, as with any kind of state municipality issue. Okay, now we're going to talk about part 2 of this assignment, which is due on Sunday and worth 10 points or 10% of your grade. This assignment, you guys, was worth 16% of your grade, which is almost a fifth. So it was kind of a lot, and you certainly needed to spend time doing this. And given that it was worth so much, I provided this rubric for you. I also should mention here that when you view your grades, the grades are together out of 16 points, but if you want to know what you got for each one, so part 1 was worth 6 points and part 2 was worth 10 points, I can tell you. You can also see pretty good idea here about how or might you have gotten scored out of the 10 points. Sorry. Okay. So here you were supposed to choose an appropriate place or disaster. So looking down here in the instructions, first choose a disaster type. So you had to find the disaster. Let's say for the earthquake, it was a place in Alaska, which most people usually think of the western states, San Francisco, but really they're more apt to happen in Alaska. So let's say you'd pick, so this is the choose an appropriate hotspot. So you choose your disaster. An appropriate hotspot would be the location that this happened. And then, did you meet expectations? This should have been like 1.5 here, so sorry about that. But this is how it was graded. 2 was meeting. Basically, 0 to 1 was 0 was not. And then, did you address all my questions? And that was worth the bulk of the points, half the points. Did you address all of these questions? And I will give an example of, whenever, and this is just pointers, whenever a professor asks you to address all questions, I think it's always best, and this will vary across person, but there are very few of you that actually put it in this form. And if you put it in this form, especially when grading, and I really truly feel that every professor that has grading should be able to offer why they grade in a certain way. But if you lay out all the things that they want to know, then you have a better basis to say what you did and didn't do right and how you can improve going forward. So very few of you laid it out like this, and this was okay. I mean, this was okay because I like the subheadings. Now, this could be improved upon, 2 things. 1, it just needs to be expanded upon. This was 10% of the grade, and we should have more information here. And these should be in APA form, not just links. This was another part of the use appropriate sources, uses and cites at least 4 sources. Cites and provide links are 2 different things. In academia, citing is using APA citations. If someone says provide a link, then you can get away with providing a link. But, I have no idea what this is or if they're credible. I mean, I can click on it, but if it was just turned in, and this is entertainment news, so yes. Citing means that you have to use appropriate APA citations. And you had to have 4 here, so that was good. So the rubric was looked at. But also, and several of you did this with the citations. So if you have these 4 links and you have answered all these questions, if I want to know where you got this information from, how am I going to know which of these links it came from? So that's a big issue. And surprisingly, I think, let me pull up, George did a nice job of this. Whenever a professor asks you to use citations, this is what you need. Because a lot of you had all of this information, and then at the end you provided me, sorry, George did a nice job. You provided me with links. Like, let's say George would have just given me all these links and not put in-text citations. So this is what these are called, in-text citations. No one would have been able to know what information came from where. So that's a big deal. And, again, if anything, in my classes, I hope that you not only learn a little bit about the subject matter, because as we know in research, people sadly retain very little from classes, but I also hope to teach you guys useful information that you can use in other classes. So here it would be, if you're asked to provide sources and information, you have to assign the in-text citations or the sources to the information that you find. That's just, a general important rule. So George, very nice job here. You guys should take heed of this. This is what full credit looks like. The only thing George could have done differently is put subheadings. So if we would have combined this individuals with those, that would have been perfect. I mean, George still got a 10 because he did a really nice job here. Used in-text citations, supported his information. He went with hurricanes. It was 6 pages. And again, I'm not to say that the length is always important, but you have to put the effort in. I have to see the effort. So this is an example of above and beyond. Okay, let's go back here to, so hit all the questions. And I did the general advice, address all points for whomever to know what they're addressing. Okay, yes, so that's basically the sources, and let's go back up here, uses appropriate sources. I tell you how many sources you need for full credit here. Organization, grammar, meets expectations. That organization would have been, if I'm asking you specific questions, I don't want to have to fish all this information out within each paragraph. So that would have been better. Okay, so I will send this out. We're going to go over now certs and then your final assignments. Okay, so that I will send this out. These are my comments on the hazard assignment. Okay, let's actually talk a little bit about the rest of the syllabus or the course outline before I get into certs and the other assignment here. So we are here. you guys are completing the CERT assignment. Again, you had nothing to do on Wednesday, but you do have, it's a pretty easy assignment compared to last week and the week before. So just answer some questions. Again, I'll go over that assignment in a second. Get the FEMA exercise in. Many of you already have those in, so that's great. And then this is your last set of reading questions. So let me actually go over the CERT now while I'm thinking about it. Okay, so for your certs, again, nothing due Wednesday. I had one of you ask about the assignment locality, and yes, this is about the hotspot or the locality you picked that had a designated disaster from last week, the hazard assignment. So I will say here, just as a reminder, the only thing that when I've looked at people's assignments that you might need to go back and add is always cite your sources. And this is huge no matter what, you guys. Cite your sources. So what are community emergency response teams? So tell me where you got that information, where you got that definition, what definition did you use? Because in this field, again, going back to, there are lots of definitions used for lots of different things. So we want to know who, did you just get it off some random website or from FEMA, from DHS, that kind of stuff. Always cite your sources. And then here, I want to have a link to where you got the information about the CERT. So, and also something to add there at the end, this anything else you find interesting. If your locality had a hotspot for, let's say, it was someplace in Alaska and a hotspot for earthquakes, in theory, you should have a very well-defined community emergency response teams. And these CERTs, you guys, and this is what I would, if you want experience, get involved with Richmond CERT or Alexandria CERT or somewhere in DC. These are super important because these can give you the experience, the networking, and they provide free training. Very important. And then here, find a peer-reviewed journal article. You can't use a duplicative one. And make sure that you attach it in PDF format. Okay, so there's CERTs. That should be up right now. And let's go. So then, reading journal, Unthinkable. You guys, this book, I just finished reading it for the second time. Really is interesting, and it's my night reading, which means for me, I actually find it enjoyable enough to want to read it. So my hope is that you guys will feel the same way. And what I'm asking you to do, and this could potentially, you guys could potentially, after this CERT assignment, have the easiest semester and improve your grade if you're not happy with it where it is, because my expectations are probably higher than many professors. But here I'm going to give you a chance to redeem yourself. I just want to know that you have read the text. So the Unthinkable first half, I want you to read the text. And right here, after each chapter, there are 8 chapters in there. Each one kind of goes through a case study of a disaster that's happened in the U.S. And she basically gives some very interesting facts about why a lot of people didn't move as quickly in 9/11, why people died in the towers. She gives some examples about Hurricane Katrina and people being stubborn. And, you know, there's lots of things that are interesting notes. So going back to this, what do I want you to do? I want you to have a reading journal. I just want you to show me that you've read it and you've thought about what you're reading it. What I do when I'm reading a text is I make notes all along the sides, etc. So what I want you to turn in. So for the first half, so the first 4 or 5 chapters, you can do the 4 chapters or the 5 chapters. I think it's 8 chapters, so let's go with 4. But essentially, you tell me, you write something up and say, chapter 1, here are all the things that I found interesting. Here's what it made me think about. Here's what it made me feel. You can do this in any sort of order. But what I don't want is you to go to the chapter and give me a quote from a chapter. If I do not think or know that you have read this book, this is where you will not get the points for this. But if you do this and you do this well, I will make this weekly assignment number 6. And then if you go here and you see weekly assignment number 7, your final project, I will allow everybody to do this reading journal again. So essentially your weekly assignment 6 and weekly assignment 7 for 2 weeks will just be reading this interesting book. And then here's to boot, you guys. If you do well on these 2, I will allow you the option to opt out of the exam and keep your grade, or do something that's not an exam but for extra credit, like maybe do a couple of reading questions. But again, I'm all about redemption, you guys, but I need to see improvement. I need to see that, yes, this class was challenging, but hopefully you learned something. So that is all I have to say now. Please email me with any and all comments, and I will talk more about the reading or the cert assignment when maybe the reading assignment when I